So what if everything you thought about leadership was just wrong? What if it's not really about your title or how much power you have or even, the skills you've learned?
But something deeper.
Yeah, something much deeper. Something the source material we're diving into today says you were actually, born with.
That's a huge question, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And it definitely challenges a lot of the ways we usually think about what makes a leader.
It really does. Welcome, everyone, to this deep dive. We're stepping into the ideas from Dr. Myles Munroe's book, Spirit of Leadership, based on these excerpts you've brought to us.
Right.
And it's a perspective that, honestly, makes you kind of reevaluate everything you thought you knew about leading.
It totally shifts the focus, doesn't it? Away from the usual techniques and strategy books.
Yeah.
And towards something much more, fundamental.
Exactly. And our mission here in this deep dive, tailored specifically for you and the insights in this material, is to unpack the book's main argument. Which is that real leadership, true leadership, isn't about skills or position. It's an attitude rooted in who you inherently are, your nature, and your connection to your source.
And the source argues that cultivating that attitude, that's the absolute key to unlocking your full potential, whether that's leading a team, a family, or really just leading your own life effectively.
Okay, so let's jump right in. The material kicks off by pointing to what it calls a pretty serious crisis in leadership today.
Yeah, it does. It talks about seeing a lack of genuine leadership all around. It mentions issues like moral integrity, corruption.
Right.
People in powerful positions who seem to be leading, double lives. It gives examples from business, the Enron, WorldCom scandals, but also broader issues with political figures, religious leaders.
It's not so much about naming names, but pointing out a pattern, right?
Exactly. A pattern where people seem more focused on playing a role, holding a title, rather than truly embodying leadership.
That focus on the external rather than the internal.
Precisely. And that observation leads straight into the source's really radical redefinition of leadership. It says right up front, genuine leadership is an attitude of the heart. And it stresses that it begins in the spirit of a person.
An attitude, not like a skill set you pick up in a weekend seminar. That's a pretty big shift from typical leadership training.
Oh, absolutely. The book insists leadership is a manifestation of a spirit, not just learning techniques or getting new skills. And it immediately pushes back against the idea that leadership is some, exclusive club for the lucky few who were born with it.
Because the source actually says every single human being has the instinct, the capacity for leadership.
Right, but often lacks the courage or maybe the will to actually cultivate it.
It makes this really profound statement. Humanity, is essentially a spirit being and was created to lead, but somewhere along the way, man lost the spirit of leadership.
That idea of a lost inherent nature, it makes me think of that powerful story the source uses, the analogy about the lion cub.
Oh yeah, the one raised among sheep?
That's the one.
He looked like a lion, had all the potential of a lion, obviously, but he acted like a sheep, sounded like a sheep, behaved completely like a sheep.
Because that was his environment, right? His conditioning, how he saw himself, he was living completely outside his real nature.
Yeah, totally disconnected.
And the key point of that story, according to the source, isn't that he needed external training on how to be a lion. The real lasting change happened when he saw his true identity reflected back at him. It sparked an internal shift. The source says change happens when the attitude is converted.
That makes so much sense, especially because the source really hammers home this idea that there's nothing as powerful as attitude.
That's right. It says attitude dictates how you respond to what's happening now, and crucially, it determines the quality of your future. The book is really clear. Attitude is a more powerful distinction in life than beauty, power, title, or social status.
Wow. More powerful than title or status, and it even calls it the distinguishing factor between a winner or a loser.
And fundamentally, the difference between a leader and a follower.
So for you listening, the really powerful insight here, according to this material, is that your attitude isn't just some passive feeling you have. It's an active force.
Yeah, the source says your attitude creates your world and designs your destiny. That's huge.
Okay, so if leadership is this inherent attitude, where does the source say this incredible capacity actually comes from? What's the origin?
It goes right back to the beginning, to creation.
Yeah.
It introduces what it calls the source and resource principle.
Okay.
The book uses this analogy of a sculpture. It says, the nature of the composition of the source material determines the nature of the composition of the product. Basically, whatever is in the source
is inherently going to be in the product. Makes sense.
Exactly. And it applies this principle directly to how humanity was created, pointing to a specific passage in Scripture. It notes that, unlike other parts of creation where God might have spoken to the earth or the water,
Right.
when it came to humans, the source says God spoke to himself, saying, "Let us make man in our image, in our likeness, and let them rule over the rest of creation."
Okay, in our image, in our likeness, what does the source say that actually means?
Well, this is where it gets really profound. The source argues that being made in God's image and likeness means possessing God's spiritual nature, characteristics, essential specifications, and substances. The design wasn't just to be similar to God, but to actually be like, act like, and function like the Creator.
Function like the Creator.
Yeah. In fact, the source uses this really striking phrase that says, you are, in a sense, in the God class because you're his offspring designed to express his nature.
Wow. And the purpose for this unique design? The source says it was stated immediately, let them rule or have dominion.
Exactly. Dominion. The source defines this using the Hebrew word rada, meaning to subjugate, rule, or reign. And it wasn't just a suggestion. The book frames it as the original mandate. The very purpose for your existence, it states, is to have rulership, dominion, mastery, authority, and leadership over the earth and its environment.
But it's really careful to make a distinction here, isn't it? It's dominion over the earth, the environment, resources.
Not over other people. Absolutely crucial distinction.
Right.
The desire to dominate other people. The source calls that a distortion of our inherent human desire to exercise leadership dominion. True dominion is about mastering your circumstances, stewarding resources well, not controlling other humans.
Okay. And being made in this divine image means we inherently carry like echoes or measures of the Creator's own attributes. This source mentions omnipotence.
Yes, but interprets it interestingly. Not just raw, brute power, but all inherent power, or maybe better put, a sense of securability in pursuing and fulfilling one's purpose.
So it's about capability linked to purpose.
Exactly. A leader rooted in that kind of inherent power uses it creatively, for good, not out of insecurity or a need to control.
And omniscience, all-knowing. How does that translate?
The source links that to our facility to understand and retain knowledge. It suggests our capacity to learn is essentially infinite. It's not about knowing everything right now, but having the fundamental capacity to know and understand.
Okay, and then there's omnipresence, being everywhere.
The source interprets this more like being comfortable, adaptable, and effective anywhere. It paints this picture. You can put a natural leader anywhere on Earth, and in a matter of time, he is in charge of his environment.
So the environment doesn't control them.
They control it, or rather, they master it. It's an internal state of being fully present and capable no matter the external situation.
That's powerful. And integrity.
Yeah, meaning pure motives, consistency, trustworthiness. The source says true leaders are integrated or one with himself, no double lives. Your inner reality aligns with your outer actions.
You know, what's really fascinating is how the source ties all this back to our fundamental sense of self.
How so?
It emphasizes that the first installation in the creation of the mankind was an image, the image of God. God didn't give human beings power first. He gave them a self-picture.
The image came before the power. Interesting.
Right. And this sound self-image is presented as the actual foundation of leadership. It's not just feeling good about yourself, it's the bedrock. How you see yourself fundamentally shapes how you see and interact with everyone else.
Which, the source argues, naturally leads to a genuine love for others. Yeah. Because you recognize they share that same incredible image, that same inherent value.
So serving others becomes, in a way, serving the Creator.
Precisely. So for you listening, digging into this source material means understanding that, from its perspective, your leadership capacity isn't some add-on. It's baked into your original design.
Yeah.
The source even says to understand our leadership attributes, it is naturally imperative for us to explore, study, and come to understand the nature of his attributes. To know yourself, you have to know your source.
Okay, but if that's the design, if we have this inherent leadership potential, why the crisis we started with? Why doesn't it look like that everywhere? What went wrong, according to the source?
The book points squarely at the fall. It describes this as the disconnection of man from his source of creation, God.
A disconnection. And the results?
Devastating, according to the source. A loss of identity, self-worth, self-concept, that sense of personal value and significance. Humanity basically lost the knowledge of who he is, where he came from, what he is capable of, where he is going, and why he exists.
Wow, that's a lot to lose.
It is. And the consequence, the book argues, is that we now function far below our true abilities and potential.
And this disconnection, the source uses some pretty strong language. It talks about mental damage, even mental illness.
Yeah, and it's really important to clarify how it uses that term. It's not a clinical diagnosis you'd get from a doctor.
Right, it's more metaphorical.
Exactly. It's describing an inherent mental defect, a kind of fundamental brokenness or confusion that stems from that disconnection. It's the root of the confusion we all face with regard to discovering our identity, self-worth, self-image, self-esteem, and sense of destiny.
A state of being out of sync with our design. And it lists symptoms of this state, things that sound, well, unfortunately familiar.
Oh yeah, things like power without purpose, money without meaning, position without a passion, or having houses but not homes, working jobs you hate, living with people you have no real connection with.
Constantly complaining but never changing anything.
Exaggerating, hiding behind false images, caring more about reputation than character. The source bluntly asks, are we sane when we live like this?
And this internal confusion, this mental illness, directly fuels the leadership crisis we see externally.
Exactly. You get people with these distorted self-concepts, maybe driven by insecurity or a raw need for power, ending up in charge. In business, government, wherever.
The source has that really stark summary. Humankind has become a kingdom of ignorant kings living under the mentality of an inferiority complex.
Oof. Yeah, it also uses that analogy of the unplugged computer again.
Right, we have the hardware.
Incredible leadership spirit, the potential, but we're cut off from the source, the power supply. So that potential is either dormant or gets misdirected, maybe even used destructively.
And the source adds another layer to the problem, right? A second Pong.
It does. It says, even if you manage to reconnect to the power source, there's often still missing software. That essential spirit of leadership, the right attitude, the right mindset, needed to actually operate according to the original design.
Okay, so it's a two-part issue. Disconnection and lack of the right operational mindset.
Pretty much. So, for you, the deep insight here is that the struggle isn't just external circumstances. The source says it's rooted in this fundamental internal disconnect. We are leaders, but we are limited because we do not know the truth about ourselves due to our disconnection from our source.
Which naturally leads to the question, how do we fix this? What's the path to restoration according to the source material?
The solution offered is pretty direct: restoration to the source. The book specifically points to Jesus Christ as the key to this reconnection.
Why Jesus specifically?
Because, the source argues, he is the embodiment and the source of the truth that corrects the errors and the false beliefs stemming from the disconnection.
So truth is central to this restoration.
Absolutely paramount. The source states, the most important pursuit in life is the pursuit of truth. It references the idea that knowing the truth will set us free.
Free from error, from lies, especially the lies we believe about ourselves.
Exactly. The source suggests Jesus came primarily to correct and redirect our thinking, to fix that faulty software, if you will.
So that's the software download, the transformation of the mind.
That's how the source frames it. Regaining the spirit of leadership isn't just about plugging back in. It's about actively rediscovering and capturing the hidden knowledge about yourself and cultivating the mentality that will set that leader free.
It's a process of aligning your mind, your attitude, with the creator's original thoughts about who you are.
And the source acknowledges this isn't instant. It's a process that takes time. Why? Because you're working against potentially years of ingrained thoughts and habits.
Makes sense. It takes time to rewire.
But the source offers hope. It says that with that reconnection to the source's spirit, you have the power and the access that will enable you to be able to do this. You're not doing it alone.
Because attitude, as the source keeps saying, isn't fixed.
Right. Attitude is a learned behavior created by our beliefs, which are produced by our thoughts. So the path is clear. Change your attitudes by changing your beliefs, by changing your thoughts about everything, especially about yourself. Intentional mental conditioning is key.
And the responsibility for doing that, it lands squarely on us, doesn't it?
It does. The source issues a challenge.
Right.
We are responsible for doing so. We cannot continue to function in a manner that we do not truly believe about ourselves. The day that we take responsibility for our attitudes is the day that we truly grow up.
Wow. Taking responsibility for attitude equals growing up.
That's the message. And it leads to this conclusion. Training in leadership, according to this source, really means training in attitude.
So it's about intentionally choosing to. Well, the source says, think talk, walk, dress, act, respond, decide, plan, work, relate, and live like leaders.
Aligning everything, your behavior, your choices, with the internal truth of your God-given design and potential.
Okay, so let's talk specifics. What are some of these key attitudes that reflect this restored spirit, this heart and image of the Creator in action? What does it actually look like?
Well, the source highlights several. It circles back again to something absolutely fundamental. Purpose. It says purpose is the first attribute that separates followers from leaders. And leadership is born when purpose is discovered and destiny is understood.
Finding your why.
Exactly. And linked to that is passion. Not just mild interest, but the deep driving force behind that purpose. A conviction, an obligation. The source even uses language like finding something you're willing to die for, not just live for.
That's intense. It mentions Paul as an example, right? Driven despite huge obstacles.
Precisely. Then there's the concept of servant leadership. The source ties this back to the Creator's original design for corporate leadership, this idea of a nation of kings, a company of rulers.
Meaning the leadership mandate wasn't just for a few, but for everyone.
Yes, given to all humanity. So the principle is, each person uses their unique gift, their specific ability, to serve others. In doing so, they become a leader in that specific area of strength. The vision is every person a leader.
I like that. What other attitudes does it highlight? Initiative comes up.
Yes, initiative seen as the natural outflow, the manifestation of making a decision, having confidence, faith, creativity. It's about not waiting around for someone else to tell you what to do, but acting from that inherent ability.
Okay. Accountability is another one.
Right. A sense of responsibility, not just to, say, shareholders or bosses, but to your own conscience, to humanity as a whole, and ultimately to the Creator.
That's a broad scope. And innovation.
Yeah, the attitude of not being trapped by prisoners of tradition. It's about having the creativity to combine old ideas in new ways, to find fresh solutions, to think outside the box. The source points to Jesus himself as a prime example of this kind of innovative thinking.
Teamwork is in there too.
Definitely. Recognizing that you don't have all the answers, that everyone brings unique value, and you need the strengths of others, that, quote, none of us is as smart as all of us.
That's a classic. And persistence.
Oh, absolutely key. The attitude of just holding on, pushing through despite setbacks, facing defeat, not as a final word, but as, feedback or a detour. Being driven by that deep purpose and conviction allows you to keep going.
So it really does all come back to that core idea. Attitude is key to leadership, and it motivates your behavior.
That's it. You have the inherent leadership spirit. The potential is there. The journey is about acquiring and actively cultivating the attitude of leadership.
And we see this play out in the examples the source uses, like Moses overcoming his fear.
Or David facing Goliath. Or Caleb. I love the Caleb example. At 85 years old, still choosing the toughest assignment, the mountain territory.
Because, as the scripture says, he had a different spirit and followed wholeheartedly.
Exactly. They weren't defined by their circumstances or what other people thought. They were defined by their internal state, that connection to purpose, their true nature. And that manifested as this powerful, unstoppable attitude.
Okay, so let's try and summarize this deep dive into your source material. It's presenting this really radical idea. Leadership isn't just a job title or a bunch of skills.
It's an inherent attitude, something wired into you from your very origin, your source.
But this potential got obscured, hidden, because of a disconnection from that source. This led to a distorted view of ourselves, limited functioning, what the source even calls a kind of mental defect or illness.
And the path back, the way to unlock that leader within, involves reconnecting to your source, which the material identifies through Jesus Christ and truth.
And then intentionally transforming your mindset, changing your thoughts, your beliefs, cultivating these specific, positive, creator-reflecting attitudes.
It leaves us with this powerful call, really, a challenge from the source.
Yeah.
You were born to lead, settle for nothing less, and to get on with it. Serve your gift to the world.
That's both a profound challenge and a really hopeful promise embedded in this material.
It really is.
So, based on everything we've unpacked here and that central message from the source, here's maybe a final thought for you to reflect on. The book states, your life is what you think it should be. If you truly are designed with this inherent leadership potential directly from your source, and if your attitude really does dictate your reality, your destiny, what's the one outdated belief or thought about yourself probably stemming from that disconnection that's the biggest obstacle right now? What's holding you back from unlocking the leader the source insists is already within you?
And maybe, just to build on that, thinking about those attitudes we discussed, Purpose, initiative, innovation, persistence, servant leadership. Which one feels like the most crucial one for you to consciously commit to cultivating, starting today, to really begin aligning with that inherent design?
Lots to think about there. We really encourage you to keep exploring these ideas, maybe revisit the source material itself. There's clearly so much depth here waiting for you to uncover and, more importantly, to apply in your own life.
We hope today's dialogue sparked something valuable for you. If it did, don't forget to subscribe, like, follow, and share. Let's spread the insight so others can grow with us too. Until next time, keep diving deep.